What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to week 7 of the Axial SCX24 budget build-off. In this series, Matt from the Scale Builders Guild and myself take the Axial SCX24 and we upgrade it with $50 every week. And again, this is week 7. We've got this week and then one more before this series is wrapped up. So we've got some important upgrades that we're going to tackle in this week's episode. Now, here is my Axial SCX24 that we've done all of our upgrades on so far. And here is a stock Betty, the exact same version that we started with before and after. First, let's talk about what we handled last week. We removed the stock motor and motor plate setup from our Axial SCX24, and then we dropped in a new setup with a forward motor mount and a much more torquey but still brushed motor. Now this gives us a little bit more forward weight bias, but most importantly, a lot more torque. The stock motor, not that great. They burn up pretty easily. I went with the 90 turn motor from PN Racing. And again, it's just a much more reliable and much stronger motor than the factory one. Going to give us just a ton more control, a lot more longevity, and it's a rebuildable motor if we want to get into any of those as time goes on this vehicle. So a huge upgrade, and the aluminum forward motor mount, as well as the machined gears that we put in there, are big upgrades over the stock options. But those upgrades pretty much ate up our budget for last week. So this week now we've got some items to tackle, and what we're going to do this week is we're going to be installing a new ESC and a new steering servo. Now the stock steering servo, first thing to really talk about, a weak steering servo is something that you just notice all of the time. It's annoying when you go to steer and it just doesn't want to do it. The stock servo saver, also not a great item. It's a little bit soft and it makes a servo that's already weak seem even mushier. So what we're going to do this week is going to be discussing the new servo that we're dropping into this vehicle. Now there's a ton of common upgrades for the SCX24s, and a lot of them can be had in a very economical way. Now previously we had installed an aluminum Samix servo mount on this that was made specifically so that it was going to be easier to mount an Emax or an EcoPower servo, since those are a little bit wider than the factory servo. Now we were still able to use the factory servo for all those weeks because we notched the ears a little bit so that it fit in there. We could still put the screws in. But this week, finally time to rip out that stock servo and drop in one with significantly more power. Now, as the name of that Samix servo mount would lead you to believe, the Emax servo and the EcoPower servos are easy options to drop into this truck. The Emax servo is one that you see commonly used, often because it's available on things like Amazon. I'll link to it below. The one thing is that it's only 16 bucks. It's available at Amazon, so oftentimes people are getting it because it's, free shipping. But the power on it is only like 1.5 to 1.8 kilograms, which is not that great. And for the money, you can get much more powerful servos. So unless you just have to have it through there because you want to save on shipping, there's better options to go with. The EcoPower 827 servo you can pick up through AMain. That's one of their house brands, but it's a stronger servo for less money. It's $14.99, so it's $1 less, and you're gonna have up to 2.1 kilograms of power. Not day and night difference, but it's more power for less money. So definitely something to consider there. Now, AMain also has another EcoPower servo that's got very similar mounting positions, and that is the EcoPower 640T. What is nice about that 640T though is that even though it is almost twice the money, it is over twice the power, bumping you up to 4.6 kilograms of steering power. One nice thing about the EcoPower 640T is that the wires actually come out of the bottom, making it a lot easier to route it out of the back side. And then if that still isn't enough power for you, Power Hobbies has the 59MG. This servo has 7.5 kilograms of power. Definitely a big jump. Now this one is significantly more money at $44.99. Depends really how much steering you absolutely just have to have. I have been running that Power Hobby servo in another one of my builds, and it is awfully nice to have all that power. So if it's in your budget and you're looking to go crazy with it, it's worth a consideration. But no matter which one of those you choose, it's going to be a huge step up from the stock servo. But for the budget build, to to keep things reasonable, we're gonna go with one of the Eco Power servos and drop that into our budget build. Installing the new servo is going to be easy, but it's not exactly just a very simple drop-in. The first thing you'll need to do is remove the stock servo by unplugging it, removing the 2 screws that hold the ears on, and removing the screw that holds the steering linkage to the servo horn. Get that out of the way. Then we're gonna need to drop in our new servo. Drop your new servo into the steering servo mount. Now you may need some larger screws or some screws with washers to hold your servo into the mount. But once you have that done, make sure to look in the box. It likely came with some servo arms. You are going to need to figure out the length of the servo arm that you're going to need for your new servo. Now, the Eco Power servo that I've got here, it came with a couple of servo horns. We're going to use the single-sided one, and we're going to end up using the 3rd hole from the inside. I think it's the 2nd to the longest. But what we need to do after determining that is we need to trim off the excess length on that servo horn. So I used my flush cutters and I just trimmed off the excess, gave it a little bit of a round profile, and that's going to help clean things up, make sure that we don't run into any further interference issues. Now, to mount the steering linkage to this new servo horn, we can't use the stock little ball stud that we had because the threads on it are too small for the holes in the servo horn. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to locate one of the pivot balls that came with the previous link sets. And we're going to drill out the center hole on that to just over 2 millimeters. You don't have to drill it out. You can just kind of work a 2 millimeter screw through the center of that. It's going to take a little bit of effort, but with some patience, you'll get through there. Once you're able to get a 2 millimeter screw through that pivot ball and it's inside of a link, attach it to the back side of that servo horn. That should allow you to have everything good and mounted. Then what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to power up that servo so that it centers itself. Make sure that the radio's on, that the vehicle is powered up, and that the steering trim on the radio is set to 0. Then put the servo horn onto the servo at that point, and now our servo will be close to the center position. If the tooth count on the servo moves it a little bit one way or the other way, then we can adjust it with the steering trim on the radio. But that wraps up the servo installation. Servos are pretty simple. It's just sometimes the fine tuning of getting them to mount properly, getting your servo horn mounted up and making sure everything clears. As I mentioned, it goes on the back side of your servo horn to keep everything a little bit closer to that line of the knuckles. You don't want it sticking way far out of the front. It just makes the leverage of everything way off and you're going to lose effectiveness on your steering. So now after our steering servo, we've got an ESC to tackle. Up to this point, we've been using the stock ESC receiver combo. It's done just fine, but it's not exactly the highest quality. It's got pretty poor low speed resolution. So once you start getting into the throttle, the first step into it delivering power is much higher than a lot of other options. So today, what we're going to be doing is bypassing that. We're still going to be using it, but we're bypassing the ESC portion. What we're going to be using instead is the Furatech Lizard. This is their nice, compact, small ESC. This is capable of running brushed or brushless motors. Now, the difference between this one and some of their other ESCs is that this has a 1.5 amp internal BEC. The BEC is like the power source that is able to drive the servos and the receiver. The more powerful your servo is, the more powerful of a BEC you need. But I don't have any issue saying that the BEC in this Lizard is capable of running something up to 640T. This ESC is only capable of running up to a 2S LiPo. Some of their other ESCs, like the Tegu or however you say it, are capable of running up to 3S LiPo and have larger BECs up to 2 amps. But this one, if you plan on running the stock 2S voltage, this one's going to do the job just fine. Now, this does have the capability of using a Bluetooth module if you'd like to pay for that extra feature. Matt pointed out that Bluetooth modules were invisible to budget builds though, so that's very handy in my case. Lucky for me, maybe not as lucky for you. But if you do spring for the Bluetooth module, it does make the programming of these ESCs absolutely fantastic. It is very easy to do from your phone. You're able to toggle from the stock or default brushless mode to the brushed mode like I'm using for that PN Racing motor. You're also able to toggle things like the function of the button that is on there. You can use it to toggle on or off the system, or you can disable it completely so that as soon as you plug it in, it just turns on. Also, you can program your throttle curves, your brake percentage, you can calibrate your radio to the ESC. You can also see live telemetry from your phone. A lot of really nice functions are supported by that Bluetooth module. Now, as we mentioned, the stock ESC was a ESC and receiver combo, and we're not replacing the receiver side, so we're still stuck using that entire unit. But what we don't need is basically anything else that was attached to it. So previously we had power wires going to this combo board, and we had the motor wires going to it. Now we can desolder or cut off both of those and make this board much cleaner. Now the internal BEC from that Lizard ESC is going to power this board. So there's no need to have a separate battery plug or anything like that. You just want to plug in the new ESC and it will power your receiver. Way simpler. And with those extra wires taken off, it cleans that board up and makes it a little bit less of a huge pain in the butt to have on your vehicle. Now, since this is a brushless or brushed capable ESC, it does have 3 wires coming off of the board. You only need to use 2 of them. In the instructions, it shows that you use A and B or B and C, not A and C. So you're using 2 wires that are next to each other, never the outside 2. I decided to use A and B, and then I cut off C just to clean things up. I don't need it. It's extra. I don't need the extra wires cluttering up my vehicle. Once I did that, I cut the old motor wires and soldered them in. A little bit of heat shrink, just got everything nice and clean, got our system all set up. And then from there, I used that invisible Bluetooth module, changed it to brushed mode, reversed the direction of the motor because the first way that I had it hooked up was backwards. So rather than swapping the motor wires, I just reversed the action in the ESC. One more thing to note is that last week we moved that motor to the front side. Previously, I had that rear chassis brace in there that I had talked about cutting short for the stock motor clearance. I reprinted that and put it in the chassis, and that's where I mounted the new Lizard ESC. Having the truck powered up now, I'm super happy with how this thing performs. It is nice and smooth. It does exactly what I want it to. The throttle curve is programmable, so you can add in a lot of low speed control if that's something you're super worried about. But the punch and controllability of this is really what I'm after, making sure that it can deliver the power that I'm looking for when I ask it to do that. And being able to power that new servo, also a big plus for me. Changing the ESC, but even more importantly, changing the servo makes a huge difference in how these trucks feel while driving. Having enough steering power is something that I'm always looking for in any RC. I've never thought that I had just too much power. But those 2 upgrades are all that we're going to get into this week's budget. So let's check up exactly where we're at on this and see what it's going to leave us for the final week of the budget build. So starting week 7, we carried over an extra $18.16. Adding that to our $50 budget, that gives us $68.16 to spend this week. The FureTech Lizard eats up most of that budget with $49.99 of it. Also, EcoPower Servo, the 827 is $14.99. So those 2 items combined would be $64.98, leaving a remainder of $3.18. We're going to carry that amount into our final week, the finale week, just a little over $50 in the final week's budget. Make sure you check that out. Go check out Matt's video for week 7 as well. See what kind of tricks he tried to pull on us this week. Make sure and check back next Wednesday for the finale of the SCX24 budget build-off. It's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to the last episode. There's a ton of items on this truck that have yet to be touched. We've got shocks and links, drive shafts. There's a whole host of other metal parts that could be thrown on here. So throw in the comments below which items you think we should try and tackle. That is going to do it for this week. As always, thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoy these videos. It helps a bunch with the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you're not already. Hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. And again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.